One of the things I love about this church is it deals so directly, so transparently and honestly with issues that are happening in the culture around us, just like Scripture. And I don't know if you've noticed, but we seem to be having a moment as a country and as a culture. Have you noticed? The great resignation, the great checkout, the great burnout. It's been described a variety of ways, but Pastor Ryan did a brilliant job last weekend talking about what the current cultural malaise is that we're experiencing. And frankly, it's hard to describe, but when you see it, you know it. Wouldn't you agree? Let me give you an example. Here's a video. It's security footage shot from a garage of a little lad, 5 years old. His name is Langdon, and he is going off to school to catch the bus, kindergarten, on a Monday morning. You ready? There he is. Looks at the bus, stops. Here comes the bus driver. She's got to help him. What's going on? And his dad describes it eloquently. He says, when Langdon is really tired, he gets a bit grumpy. And then gets way over dramatic. Sound familiar? Anyone you know? He says, I think we all feel like this on a Monday. And I think that's why it's so relatable to see the bus and be like, I can't do it today. Here's the issue. It's no longer Monday. It's Monday and Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and yes, even some Sundays. And what it is this pervasive sense that there is no help, that we're helpless. And because of that, there is no hope. And we're hopeless. And that's the worst place in the world to be. And it's always compounded when we're uncertain as to what the anxiety or the concern is, because it is so vague and ill-defined. Today, in the second of the series, we have 3 more weeks after today. In the second of the series, I want to just try to elevate and change your perspective so you see the circumstances slightly different than people perceive them today. Because what we define as reality that leaves us feeling helpless and hopeless isn't reality. I want to show you the truth. I want to take you to the Word and share with you one of my favorite passages of Scriptures. One of the stories that the Gospel author Mark told so beautifully. Now, you need to remember, anytime you're reading anything in the Gospel of Mark, it is short and sweet and very succinct. And he packs so much truth in so few words, you really have to pay attention to see what's going on. Come on, let me take you on this journey. We're in Mark chapter 5. We'll pick up the thread in the 24th verse. If you brought your Bibles, awesome. So if you didn't, no worries. I'm going to put it up on the screen. And what I'll do is I'll break it up into sections so that we can briefly discuss it as we move through this word. A large crowd followed and pressed around Jesus. And a woman was there who had been subject to bleeding for 12 years. She had suffered a great deal under the care of many doctors and had spent all she had. Yet instead of getting better, she grew worse. Whoa. Remember what I said about the transparency and honesty of Scripture? Ancient documents did not talk about women hemorrhaging, especially a woman who had hemorrhaged 12 years. It was unspeakable. It was unthinkable. It was never the topic of conversation, nor was it part of the writing. And yet here it is, right in the gospel narrative, right in front of us. And Mark, who is so adept as a historian, in very few words draws a picture of a woman and immediately triggers the compassionate response. He also, by the way, gets a dig in on doctors. Did you catch that? She had suffered a great deal under the care of many doctors. Now, If you've ever dealt with a chronic illness, thank God for doctors, nurses, specialists, all of them. Wouldn't you agree? But if you've ever had a chronic illness, you just get sick and tired of seeing the white coats. You get tired of the weekly appointments, the shots, the pokes, the prods. Oh, Lord. And none of it had helped her. And she felt all the hopelessness and the despair. For this unnamed woman, it went well beyond spiritual, physical, emotional burnout. She was in the depths. When she heard about Jesus, I love that. I'll come back to that. When she heard about Jesus, she came up behind him in the crowd and touched his cloak. Because she thought, if I just touch his clothes, I will be healed. Immediately her bleeding stopped, and she felt in her body that she was freed from her suffering. Wow! Look what's packed into that text. It tells us, Mark tells us, when she heard about Jesus. How do people hear about Jesus? Well, they either hear from you or someone like you, or they don't. And the simple reality, the simple truth is, there are people that you have a relationship who will only ever hear about Jesus from you, because they wouldn't believe it from anyone else. She heard from someone, and it triggered hope. What kind of hope? Well, think about this. Because she was bleeding, because she was hemorrhaging, she was perpetually unclean. That meant she was alienated and distanced, not just from the temple, but from all the people who intended to live clean so that they could participate in the rituals of Judaism. And she was prohibited. She was excluded until someone, in her despair and hopelessness, told her about Jesus. And for the first time, after suffering under the care of a great many doctors, there was a spark of hope. Because when you're hopeless and someone tells you about a chance for help and hope, it changes everything. It's interesting, when she touched his cloak, and rabbis of the day would have been wearing a prayer shawl that had 4 tassels, 2 in the front, 2 at in the back, that hung down from each corner. And the suspicion is, according to scholars, that she touched one of the tassels. She felt the healing. Because you know when you're sick, and you know when you feel better. And in an instant, this woman felt whole. At once, Jesus realized that power had gone out from him. He turned around in the crowd and asked, "Who touched my clothes?" "You see the people crowding against you," his disciples answered, "and yet you can ask, 'Who touched me?'" The disciples were the first skeptics. And if truth be told, Mark kind of portrays them as the slowest among all of them. These guys were so clueless so often, and Mark just makes fun of them. He kind of jabs at them. And he doesn't say, "You idiots," but you know he's thinking it. All right? And they couldn't believe that Jesus could feel the power of life flowing out of him. The story concludes here. But Jesus kept looking around to see who had done it. Then the woman, knowing what had happened to her, came and fell at his feet, and trembling with fear, told him the whole truth. Now hear this close. This last statement from Jesus, not from me, but hear it in the compassionate voice of the Lord. Because he wasn't just speaking to her, he was speaking to you. "Daughter, your faith has healed you. Go in peace and be freed of your suffering." You see, in a helpless world, Jesus offers help. In a hopeless world, Jesus offers hope. He offers healing and freedom. He offers life. Let's unpack this. Let's look at the takeaways from this text and just very quickly unpack it and think it through. First and foremost, the woman knew she had a problem. Do you? Do you know that you have a problem? Because the world is suffering, and we're hurting, and we're wondering who's there for us. This last week was my birthday. Thank you. I had a great birthday. Thank you. And I received the best card imaginable. And it came from a couple here in the church. And I thought you might be curious and like to hear it. Are you curious? You want to hear my birthday card? All right. This is what it says. If you ever wonder who loves you, who cares about you, who's got your back when things get rough, who would do anything in the world for you, who's there for you, no matter when, no matter what, just remember. We all wonder those things. Oh, come on, that's hilarious. I laughed out loud. I yelled to my wife, Marianne, come here, you got to hear this. And the irony, the beautiful irony, is this came from a couple that I have known and loved for 20 years, and they've had my back, and they've provided their love and support all the years. And I thought that was brilliant, because right now people feel like not only are they hopeless and helpless, they're damaged, a hot mess, and they wonder if there's anyone there for them. I want to give you two contrasting perspectives on your life. Remember when people used to go to the grocery store to shop? Rather than the pickup or the delivery. You remember when they'd go to the grocery store? You remember that? Wasn't that long ago? Come on. And oftentimes, they would have a cart parked somewhere where you'd go buy it when you were shopping. And it would be a cart piled up with damaged canned goods. Remember this? Remember seeing this? And the cans were dented. You didn't know if they were leaking. You assumed they threw them away if they were leaking. But they were clearly damaged. And the labels were torn. And sometimes the labels were gone. Remember this? And the cans were only like 10 cents, which seems cheap if it's a good can of peaches. But I mean, it could be stewed prunes or something worse. And you never knew what you were getting. And you'd look at it and you go, wow, what a damaged mess. And that's how people see themselves today. They feel like their labels are torn or their labels are gone. And it causes more anxiety and uncertainty than you can imagine. They feel like their lives are dented and bashed, that they are no longer what they once were, and they are afraid of what they might become. And we live in an age of angst that is fueling the burnout that is so much a part of the culture. We don't know who we are because we don't know whose we are. And that's why we struggle so much labeling ourselves. And God forbid the trolls of social media label us ever, because you know it's going to be an ugly, ugly description. It must break God's heart to see us perceive ourselves as damaged goods. Because not only did God create us, knitting us together in our mother's womb before our parents were even aware, God created us wondrously. And God is the one who labeled us as an individual of infinite worth. Let me draw you a contrasting word picture, word image. You've got the cart of dented, damaged cans. You've got that in your mind, right? Forget it, because that's not you. Let me give you another image. Here, let me show you this. You know what this is? Oh, yeah. You know what this is? Can you see? Oh, yes. It is a brand new, crisp $100 bill with the blue security ribbon, and it's pristine. It's beautiful, and it is worth $90. You've been shopping in the wrong place, John. How much is it worth? How much? Yes, of course it is. But what if I crumple it up? What's it worth? What if I stamp on it? What if I drag it in the dirt of the stage and the platform, and it's just, oh, now it's a mess? What's it worth? And you'd still take it, wouldn't you? Yeah. Because you know its worth is unquestionable, right? But we see ourselves as a dented, damaged can, and we see this beat up little piece of paper as of perpetual worth, and we have missed the point precisely. Because God has named you and claimed you. Because God alone has made you. And how has He defined you? As His beloved child. And here, let me just get to the hard truth of this. He longs for nothing more than to envelop you with all of His love and care, so that you are certain that in all the circumstances of life, there is hope. There is hope. There is Jesus Christ. If only you dare to have the faith to reach out and touch Him. And there's the catch, actually. The woman turned to the one source of help, who is Jesus Christ, the source of the universe. Now, we live in a skeptical age, and people are doubtful. They really are. And people point to science as if science disproves God, as if science denies that there is one great power of the universe. And actually, I find scientists are the most supportive people in terms of finding faith, exempting, of course, Dawkins and a few others. A little girl turned to Albert Einstein once and asked him about prayer. She asked, do scientists pray? And this is what he said. Everyone who is seriously involved in the pursuit of science becomes convinced that a spirit is manifested in the laws of the universe, a spirit vastly superior to that of a man or woman, and one in the face of which we with our modest powers must feel humble. Einstein went on to say in an interview that was follow-up to this conversation, I'm not an atheist. The problem involved is too vast for our limited minds. We are in the position of a little child entering a huge library filled with books in many languages. The child knows someone must have written those books. They do not know how. They do not understand the languages in which they are written, and yet the child dimly suspects a mysterious order in the arrangement of the books, but does not know what it is. That, it seems to me, is the attitude of even the most intelligent human being toward God. We see the universe marvelously arranged and obeying certain laws, but only dimly understand those laws. God isn't the God of the gaps that exists where there is human ignorance. No, God is the God that is revealed the more we know. Francis Collins, in his brilliant book, The Language of God, Francis Collins, the guy who unwound the human genome, saw it as the very language of the Almighty, the Creator. You see, there is one source of hope. And how do I know? Because as the woman experienced, as I've experienced, when you reach out in faith to Jesus Christ, you feel the healing begin. But there's the catch. We are the ones who must reach out. Because God is limited. God is limited by His own limitations, and God will never coerce or drag you into a loving relationship with Him. God always gives you the freedom to choose. That's why people ask dumb questions like, why is there evil? Why is there war in Russia and the Ukraine? Why is there human tragedy and travesty in Africa and South America? How can God allow that to happen? Simple answer. He doesn't. People do. Because God sets us free. And you choose. You choose to either welcome Him into your life by reaching out to release the divine power of His love in your life, or you shut yourself off. You know, Revelations 3:20, Jesus says, I stand at the door and knock. And the best images of that always show the door. Where's the door? There it is. Without a latch on this side. Because Jesus cannot force it. Jesus cannot open it unless we welcome him in. The world right now is running on empty. Have you noticed? Let me ask you, just out of curiosity, how many of you are the people who fill up your gas tank when you're at half a tank? How many of you are half a tankers? Yeah, doesn't it feel good to have a full tank of gas? Yes. Have a tank and you stop and you fill it up. How many of you are quarter tankers? You fill it up when it hits the quarter mark. Yeah. How many of you are an eighth of the tankers? How many of you wait until the dumb little light comes on that says, hey! Yes, fess up, raise your hands, come on, yes. Now imagine that little light comes on, and it's been on for a little while. 10, 15, 20 miles. And then you see a Quick Trip. Don't you love Quick Trip? And you zip into Quick Trip, right? And you pull up to the pumps, you run into the store, and you get a hot dog or a donut. Or maybe you get a Rooster Booster or a Big Gulp or whatever it is that they have there. And maybe you hit the candy aisle, whatever it is. But you just kind of load up on all the stuff that they have, and then you run out, get back in your car, and you drive away. What's wrong with that picture? You've never refueled. And that's the reality of our culture today. Have you noticed? The church is like a Quick Trip. It takes longer to fill up, but we offer something far more important than Big Gulps or Rooster Boosters. Maybe we should offer hot dogs. Micah, what do you think? You think that might fly? But the whole point of the church is for you to come here to be reconnected so that you can be refueled spiritually, emotionally, relationally, professionally. And that can only happen when we dare to follow the example of the woman who reached out in faith to touch Jesus and then encountered the Lord of life, who spoke to her with such love and compassion and offered her the freedom of living in his love. That's the step that's necessary. Next week, we're going to talk about dealing with the feelings. The following 2 weeks, we're going to talk about the practical aspects of moving beyond burnout. But I got to tell you straight from the heart, none of that can happen until you take the first step of faith. And it doesn't mean you have figured it all out. It means that you've figured out enough to know that you're running on empty and you need more. You need the Lord of life to refuel and refresh your spirit. And that can start right now.